What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to your main event for the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast, content of the week, episode 365 plus, whatever, I don't know, the numbers are all over the place, but this is not about numbers, this is about brackets, because we're talking about the 2018 Champsgiving tournament, which just officially ended a minute ago, and you don't know that yet because you're not listening to this yet, but you will be listening later, and we will be breaking down the finals and all throughout the tournament, how you guys voted. But first things first, who is talking? Well, I am your host as always, Tony Mango, and joining me as always, I've got the birthday boy here, Callum Wiggins. Happy birthday, man.
Thank you very much. 26 years and a year close to death.
Chendan, yeah. Caroline says you need to eat a piece of cake for her. So hopefully the cake's good at the very least.
I got a Spider-Man cake
because
I'm like 12 at heart.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Well, what flavor was the cake? Hold on a minute here.
Responsibility flavor.
Oh, that's
so it's like the flavor of having like 2 kids and a mortgage.
Yeah.
It's like, this tastes like Uncle Ben dying. Also on the line, I've got another usual suspect here, Robert DeFelice.
Hello, and I am a man who turns off Facebook birthday notifications, so I did not know it was Callum's birthday. Happy birthday, Callum.
Thank you. It's nice to know who your real friends are.
Aye.
Well, you know who's not a real friend? Harry Osborn.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah, real fucker. Man, I kind of just want to do a whole podcast about Spider-Man now. Just be like, dude, how cool is Carnage? And like, how can Dr. Octopus last through all those punches when he's just a normal fat dude and whatever? Like, so many different discussions.
Folks, Into the Spider-Verse is getting rave reviews.
I already bought my ticket. Although I already bought my ticket for Aquaman too, so I don't know the validity behind that. And I'm gonna be seeing Creed this weekend. Creed 2.
I hope they sing My Sacrifice.
I hope that Rocky at least just goes at some point. I thought that Drago could change. Anyway, we are completely off the rails here because let's be honest. Champsgiving, what the fuck are you guys voting for on this? Some of these choices did not understand here, but let's just go like round by round, so to speak, when it comes to this. Also, if my audio quality sucks, it's because I'm still fucking around with that. So, sorry, we're at like 80% volume on one and 70% volume on another or something, and I don't know. So maybe my gain is up too much. Maybe my volume's too low. Maybe there's too much background noise. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Drop in the comments below.
I mean, we're pretty sure it doesn't suck any more than usual.
Yeah, it seems like it's about the same, but that's still annoying. And
like this week's Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, that's kind of about it. It's just like, yeah, it still sucks. If you are curious of who ended up getting the most amount of votes in like a blowout kind of a situation, it was the 2 bye rounds.
Obviously.
Hulk Hogan and Bruno Sammartino for this tournament. They had 2 byes because we didn't have 2 extra people that could have been put into the tournament, mostly because it would have been potentially Samoa Joe and Braun Strowman, and that would have filled it out perfectly. We would have had 64 people. But no. They didn't win those titles at Super Showdown or Crown Jewel, so we couldn't really do anything with that. And they got 2 bye rounds, so 100% by default. But if we ignore that, because obviously you weren't able to vote for anybody else, the biggest blowout for this was The Rock beating Jack Swagger in round 1, as well as AJ Styles beating Bray Wyatt in the same round, the same amount. Both of them were 99.1% of the vote, where it was 105 to 1. Which goes to show you that Jack Swagger and The Rock, not comparison. And AJ Styles and Bray Wyatt, as much as AJ Styles has not had the best championship reign, Bray Wyatt's just not on par. Those 2 made sense to me. I mean, I never would have imagined that Jack Swagger would have had a chance against The Rock. I never would have imagined that Bray Wyatt would have beaten AJ Styles.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much a given. It's quite ironic with the fact that Bray Wyatt is the guy that actually beat he beat AJ Styles in the Elimination Chamber to win his one and only WWE Championship. But there's no comparison in terms of which one had the better reign. You kind of like hope to pretend that Wyatt's one didn't actually exist in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
And Swagger, for any sense of the imagination, should never ever have been a world champion.
I think most people have forgotten that Jack Swagger was a world champion.
Pretty forgettable.
I wonder if he has.
I'm sure he has.
Well, speaking of the whole idea of forgetting people that were champions, Jinder Mahal lost to The Miz. Makes perfect sense.
Agreeable.
Undertaker...
It's kinda,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it's kind of hard to forget that Jinder Mahal was WWE champion, though. It's still flashback material.
Forgettable reign, though, as far as, like...
Oh, yeah, no quality.
Years in the future, it's just going to be like, oh, yeah, he won that title? That sucked. The Undertaker beat Great Khali. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
No surprises when it comes to Shawn Michaels beating Sergeant Slaughter.
You were about to say Charlotte Flair.
I was going to say Sergeant.
Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter. It's so funny because he gets into every Legends video game, every like big world title discussion because he was in the main event of a Mania with Hogan. But God, it was so pointless. And I hate the fact that he's even champion. So I'm glad people had enough sense to vote the greatest of all time over fucking Sergeant Slaughter.
Well, that's actually something that I want to bring up, and we might as well bring it up here. Round 3, I had put up a poll because I was curious. I was like, you know what? Some of these things, and we'll get into each individual vote and stuff like that, but I was just like, some of these don't seem like they're translating as well, because the objective of this tournament was world champions in WWE, which means WWE Championship, World Heavyweight Championship, and the Universal Championship. Not the WCW Championship, not the ECW Championship, not the NWA, not the Intercontinental Championship, not the overall superstar in general. And I got this feeling that people were just not sticking to that. Either it was like a subconscious thing or a conscious effort to vote for people that, like, Shawn Michaels has never had, like, the best world championship reign. And he's my favorite of all time, but he was never going to be my choice to win this tournament. And that's because I look at his, he wins it at WrestleMania 12, he loses it at Survivor Series, he wins it again at Royal Rumble, he loses it again just, a couple weeks later or whatever it was. And he had, that other title reign would be Triple H in the Elimination Chamber and such. But, he's my favorite of all time, but he's not the best champion and all that. And I put up on round 3 a poll asking people, do you realize that this is just supposed to be for the world titles in WWE and not anything else? And 30% of the people said, yeah, I've just been voting whoever I like better. And I was kind of like, well, fuck, that defeats the purpose of this tournament. Because then you're voting for, if you, by all means, Jack Swagger is not a better world champion than The Rock. But if he would have been, and The Rock was just a more popular superstar, The Rock would have won anyway, and that's not how it should really have gone, One of those being, and people might disagree with me on this, but JBL and Ric Flair, that was something that I thought should have been closer, relatively speaking. It was, let me see here, 84% of the vote went to Ric Flair. And I'm like, JBL was the longest reigning SmackDown champion, and maybe you didn't like his title reign and stuff, but I got a feeling people voted for Ric Flair because he's the 16-time world champion all around, and not factoring in his, 2 WWE title reigns?
2, yeah.
Were his 2 WWE title reigns all that much better than JBL's to have 84% of the vote instead of like 60% or something, Or were people just voting for Ric Flair because he's Ric Flair?
It's clear that they were just voting on the name value of the guys, but Flairs were actually 2 of the most forgettable of all time because of the time period it was in. It was in such a transitional time that not a lot of people even saw a lot of stuff with Flair as WWF champion.
That is true. But I also, well, I personally would have voted for Ric Flair in this situation. I think I did when the poll went up, just because I categorised JBL's title reign as the thing that killed SmackDown, as its own like brand, and led to it being just like the, not so much the understudy of Raw, because it always was the B show anyway, but just being the show that, okay, I'd occasionally tune into, but wasn't really anything special. Like it was like the precursor to SmackDown just being a grander version of Main Event when the brand split ended. It was just like, okay, I don't need to watch SmackDown because nothing of consequence ever happens here. That all started with JBL like seeping the life out of the show.
So I know you hate Triple H of that era as well. Would you have preferred Triple H on SmackDown?
Well, that's
JBL.
Well, isn't that the point of like the Paul Heyman promo went after ECW One Night Stand? Is the fact that the only reason JBL ever became WWE champion is because Triple H didn't want to move to SmackDown.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm asking you. Like, what do you think?
I would have preferred if they put a good guy in front of it, or if JBL. Wouldn't mind JBL being world champion if it didn't last for 9 months. Like, they get to a point where you need to just switch it up a little bit. There were many viable people that could have been champion again. You could have put the title back on Eddie Guerrero. Could have given it to The Undertaker. Could have given it to Booker T. There was lots of different options, and they just kept it on just a guy that's always been a perennial mid-carder. And the only reason he held the title for as long as he did is because Vince McMahon really likes him. It's the only reason he still has any connections to WWE right now. But I know that's going too much into just a random first round match where JBL got eliminated, and thank God for that. But
I mean, JBL wasn't going to win. Like, that's it, in the grand scheme of things. Of course, it was like that was going to balance itself out somewhere down the line. Even if he would have beaten Ric Flair, he would have lost to Randy Orton for sure.
Oh yeah, no, neither of these two were ever going to actually win the entire thing because it does relate to WWE Championships. But it just makes me smile that JBL didn't make any further than this one.
And for those curious, the seeding for this was based off of combined days as champion for all 3 title reigns. So somebody like Brock Lesnar, he won the WWE Championship and he won the Universal Championship. We just combined those 2 days together based off of what they would have been at Crown Jewel. And somebody like Finn Balor, he won the Universal Championship and that was it. And he had a 1-day title reign. So that's why he was up against John Cena. It was like, John Cena had to win that one, for instance. Let's see, Bret Hart beat Ivan Koloff. Ultimate Warrior lost to Goldberg, which to me, kind of a wash, sort of. But Bret Hart lost to Goldberg in round 2. That to me is crazy. Absolutely crazy. And that was the one that made me really go, more than anything else, I was just like, really? People are voting for Goldberg as a better WWE champion than Bret Hart. Why? How? Bret Hart was a 6-time champion, I think?
He's a 5-time champion.
5-time champion. And he was like the guy for a long time, and Goldberg was basically like given the title because it was like, he's Goldberg. He won a lot in WCW. And his Universal title reign lasted a month. Maybe. Might have been 3 weeks or something like that. I can't remember the specifics behind it, but it was like he won that at Fastlane and then dropped it the very next time that he had to fight. It was literally the whole purpose of that was just to give a little bit of an extra boost to the Brock Lesnar Goldberg match. So that was a completely pointless title reign. And I can't imagine that his one title reign that he had before that was collectively so much better than everything that Bret Hart had done.
It wasn't by any stretch of imagination. He was basically, they gave him the title at the wrong time, and then he only held it for a few months and only really exclusively defended it against Triple H. So it wasn't much of a reign at all. It's just the case that Goldberg is more in the mindset of people because he was recently champion.
Well, that's kind of what I want to get into because it's crazy to me that Goldberg, even if we just forget the rules of the tournament for a second, even if we just take of all time, it's crazy that people really put Goldberg over Bret Hart in that case, just because I think Bret Hart, in the modern day fans' eyes, isn't that big of a deal, and a lot of modern day fans see him as kind of a crybaby, and he was never really that good. But for fans like us, Bret Hart was one of the first guys like an AJ Styles or Daniel Bryan to focus on in-ring work, and I cannot believe that fucking Goldberg, who, even if let's take his WCW tenure for a second, he is the most overhyped, overrated piece of crap to come out of the entire Attitude Monday Night War era. There is nothing special about Bill Goldberg.
That's so utterly wrong, but I don't really want to go into it too much because it's not a Goldberg podcast. But that is, I mean, I agree with you on a lot of things, Rob. We
over Bret Hart?
I think, well, again, I don't really get too much into it, but like, I think if Goldberg was handled correctly, he would have been a bigger star than Bret Hart ever was.
I could see the argument for that, but I mean,
but the fact of the matter is he wasn't.
Yeah,
the fact of the matter is he wasn't, and I completely agree with you that Bret Hart should be going ahead in this tournament, and should be going ahead in terms of like overall in the way that history actually played out. But I think to say that Goldberg was the most overrated in a time where you had Jeff Jarrett as a multiple-time WCW champion.
I was getting heated. That might have been a little extreme. But I don't know, man. I've never seen why people think he is the legitimate greatest of all time.
He's not the greatest of all time.
That boggles my mind. I might have gone overboard, and I apologize for that. But it's still ridiculous to put him over Bret Hart.
And I would have been okay with, like, I mean, Randy Orton beat Ric Flair in round 2, and then it was Randy Orton who beat Goldberg to get into round 4. If it would have been Randy Orton, Bret Hart, and Randy Orton would have won, I would have disagreed with it, but I would have been okay with it. And the fact that, like, Goldberg beat Bret, I was just like, did this, what? Like, because some of these things, like, round 2 had Undertaker or Shawn Michaels. Okay, well, you can basically kind of argue either one of them. I would have voted Undertaker, and Undertaker won, and I was like, okay. Bruno Sammartino against The Miz. Bruno Sammartino has to win that. That kind of stuff is sort of like, it's a given a little bit, or it's like, well, the opinion may vary, and these two are both credible, and whatever, that kind of a thing. But the Bret Goldberg thing was just for like, what? That's happening here? Like, it wasn't a blowout, it wasn't like 90%, but it was still surprising to me. I just didn't see that being the case. What do we have here?
4 out of 10 voters. 4 out of 10.
Cena beats Balor, mentioned that. Kevin Owens beats Big Show. Wasn't too surprised on that because Big Show has a lot of detractors. And then John Cena beats Kevin Owens, which makes perfect sense. Stone Cold Steve Austin beats Christian. Yeah, saw that one coming.
I think we should give him one more match.
Maybe.
Just to make sure.
Round 2 had Austin against The Rock. That's just how the seeding worked, which I think that if they would have been on opposite sides of the tournament, they could have potentially been against each other in the finals. But Austin gets the win there. And
the right thing to do.
Then I'll double back on that when it comes to talking about round 3. But another section of the tournament was Triple H beats Andre the Giant, of course, because it's like Triple H is a 13-time or 14-time champion, and Andre the Giant technically didn't kind of really all that much have a title reign. So that was like a given. Jericho beats Mysterio. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Batista beat Iron Sheik. That was one of the ones that I thought could potentially go either way, but I thought that Batista would win that one.
Why?
Because I thought that maybe there was old school people that would have really been like, I'm going to go with Iron Sheik instead.
Iron Sheik had a bad title reign being by old school standards.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that somewhere along the line somebody would want to vote for Iron Sheik though, because he's Iron Sheik. Like,
well, people did vote for the Iron Sheik. He didn't get like no votes in this thing. Got like 5 or something.
It was 8 votes compared to Batista's 98.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was like one of those ones where I wouldn't have been too shocked if it would have been closer.
I think if you were a comedy guy and you had a good like Iron Sheik impression, and people thought you might go off on a tangent about it, they would have totally voted in the Iron Sheik.
Maybe.
But, you know,
Batista humbled him. Diesel and Dean Ambrose came to Dean Ambrose. Not too shocked about that one.
That's
Diesel's
fucking ridiculous, but whatever.
Hey, speaking of the most overrated parts of the
Hold on, just go.
Calm down, Rob. Just get a glass of wine. I mean, it's fake, dude. You don't need to worry about it.
I'll stay here way too long trying to defend Kevin Nash.
get a steak dinner and defend him during that.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan wins the bye round. If he would have lost that would have been insane, especially because it was literally impossible. Daniel Bryan beats Kane. I wasn't too shocked about that one. Daniel Bryan has not had the best championship reigns, but at the same time, Kane had a one-day one, and the other one was just kind of mediocre. And Daniel Bryan's more popular and everything, so that's not a shock. But AJ Styles and Bray Wyatt played out the way that we said earlier. Sheamus and Jeff Hardy I thought was kind of a wash a little bit, so I would have been fine with either of them winning, and Jeff Hardy took that one.
I would have been fine with Venkit winning that one. Fuck.
Pedro Morales and Antonio Inoki. That was one of those things where the old school people probably had like a real fun time with that one, but the people that were very clearly more on the modern side were probably like, oh, I don't know who the fuck these people are and stuff. But Pedro Morales is one of the longest reigning ones, and Antonio Inoki doesn't even have an official title reign. So that was like, if you voted for Inoki on that, I don't know, you're crazy. Yokozuna and King Booker. I figured Yoko would win, but I thought that King Booker had a shot for that at the very least. What was confusing to me, and I'll just jump right into it now. Yokozuna beat Pedro Morales, and I think that goes to show the bias of the time frames.
I think I think when you equate the length of a title reign to notoriety, Pedro Morales is probably at the very low end of the stuff.
Yeah.
In the sense of he has a longer title reign than most like superstars that we know combined, and yet nobody knows who he is really. Nobody.
Have you ever seen a Pedro Morales match?
I've seen a couple. Nothing stand out. I mean, I struggle like Tony does to watch matches from that sort of era because they're all story based, which is fine. You would want to see a lot more of that in today's wrestling, but the severe lack of any sort of variety or athleticism is a bit of is quite hard to embrace in today's wrestling atmosphere.
Yeah, I honestly can't tell you a single Pedro Morales match.
I don't even know. I can't remember what his finisher is. I think it was like
the backbreaker of some sort, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was either a backbreaker or a bear hug or something like that. It's like just like moves that would be used to get a 1 count nowadays.
Yeah,
I know he beat Koloff for the belt.
He was the one that beat
that's
Koloff.
The one match I've seen of his because it was on a DVD that WWE put out.
I think he's more notable as an Intercontinental Champion than as a WWE Champion, even though he held that one for much longer. Just because in the sense that because he'd already been WWE Champion by the time he won the Intercontinental Championship, he added a lot of prestige to that title and made it legitimate at a time where people just thought it was just a fake belt.
He's one of those guys that I really kind of looked at this tournament and said, "There's no way Pedro Morales wins. Like we're way too separated from his era for him to beat juggernauts like The Rock and Stone Cold and John Cena and you know."
For context with Morales, he was given the championship following, like I said, Ivan Koloff beat Bruno, and back in those days, whoever was champion, it was largely based off of the people you had going to your shows and the type of market you were appealing to. Bruno was appealing to the Italian market, and they tried to get the Puerto Rican market with Pedro Morales.
Yep.
So that's how he got the belt and why he stayed champion for so long.
And it was so much easier to stay champion for as long as they did back then because it was like, well, you only did house shows. And then a big show every once in a while kind of a thing. Like, they didn't even have WrestleMania, so it wasn't even like, let's build up to pay-per-views and stuff. And nowadays, you know, a week after somebody wins the title, people can be like, well, I'm already sick of this or something like that. So you could put the championship on somebody for 3 years, and it was like, well, that's just because, you know, there's not really much going around. Like, you know.
Well, there's also the aspect that we should get across is the fact that these superstars actually drew. Whereas nowadays, people don't draw. The WWE name draws.
Yeah. You're watching
Yeah.
WWE. You're not watching for AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, whatever.
And you might be watching for people that you like and stuff like that, but they're not the reason you're watching. Unless it's Becky Lynch, but we pass by that bit. But people went to shows to see Pedro Morales specifically and see his matches. It didn't really matter too much what was on the undercard. He was the draw of the entire event.
Yeah. And he loses to Yokozuna, which, you know, fine with it. Whatever. CM Punk beats Rob Van Dam. Not too shocked on that one. Psycho Sid beats Superstar Billy Graham. I was a little bit shocked about that one. Not too much, but a little bit. Because I know that Sid's got his detractors. But I knew that this was like, that's the CM Punk block. You know?
Sid has his detractors for pretty good reasons, really. I don't think he was as bad as many people assume he is. But his title reigns aren't that memorable.
And I think a lot of people might know Superstar Billy Graham nowadays for his very bizarre and hate-filled rants directed at Chris Jericho.
Yeah,
and
I think I'd
pretty much
rather.
anybody.
I think I'd rather spend time in the company of Sid than Billy Graham based on recent events.
Yeah, I mean, Sid seems cool.
He's got half the brains that we do, so you
Uh,
know.
this one was kind of surprising to me. This was another one that made me say, okay, people aren't voting based off of championships, which was Bob Backlund beats Ted DiBiase by 2 votes. Ted DiBiase technically doesn't have a title reign.
Yeah.
Bob Backlund is like the 3rd longest or something out of all combined times. And that right there just shows people said, I like Ted DiBiase better. Which I don't blame them. I like Ted DiBiase better too. But there's no argument here. Literally no argument that the 3 days or whatever that Ted DiBiase defended a title that isn't considered an official title reign compares to, I don't know, what was it, like 2,000 days as champion or whatever from Bob Backlund?
Yeah, it was about 5 years, I think.
It's insane. Like, there's just no argument to it. And he almost beat Bob Backlund. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, all kidding aside, I think it's really crazy that in today's day where you have all of these platforms to go back and know the history, people are just still very blind to it. You know what I mean? Because Bob Backlund was the guy following Bruno. Like, and for context, that's like, you know, Cena following Rock in Austin. Bob Backlund was on top for a very long time, and for him to almost lose like that to a guy just because he was in the Hogan era, it's not right.
And for that record, I was not counting $1 Million Championship as a world title reign, for anybody that was wondering.
Well, that sounds like a personal problem, Tony.
Well, I mean, then we would have had to put Goldust in here, Ted DiBiase
Virgil.
Jr., Virgil. Yeah. There was no way I was going to put, you know, best world champions ever. How's Virgil going to do in the tournament? Like, it's not going to be a thing.
He would have done swimmingly. Virgil's amazing.
I bet
Based
he would have
off-
got to the 3rd round because people would troll vote.
Based off of this, he probably would have beaten Bob Backlund. You know,
Yeah.
just... Roman Reigns beat Chris Benoit.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Randy Savage beat Mankind. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Angle beat Dolph Ziggler. That makes sense, too.
Total
Didn't
sense.
do it in the World Cup tournament.
Brock Lesnar beat Vince McMahon. I mean, I know it was tough, but, yeah. Rollins beat Eddie Guerrero. That one was one that I could have seen going either way.
Rollins is the right choice, but it hurts me to see that. Just as a total mark for Eddie Guerrero, I don't like him losing anything. And I was pretty sure
he's one of those guys I wish would have been champion for longer. You know, like you were talking about JBL being on top of SmackDown for so long. I really wish Eddie Guerrero would have gotten a real run.
Yeah, that's pretty much the case. But it's no denying that Seth kind of carried Raw for quite a considerable period of time. So I think he merits going forward in the tournament.
Yeah, he was definitely at least a round 2 guy for me.
Yeah.
Unless he would have been up against like Hulk Hogan or something like that. And then it would have been like, all right, never mind. But that's not how the seeding worked out. Edge beat out Buddy Rogers, again, proving that there's an anti-older kind of stigma a little bit.
Also, Buddy Rogers sucked as the champion.
That's the other thing, too. Is I would have voted for Edge anyway, but that's just another example of a younger guy kind of beating an older guy.
Oh, yeah, true, but he only held the title for like a month anyway, so it's like, I know there was no way that Edge was going to lose this anyway, but
yeah,
it doesn't make it does make sense both ways why it was such a landslide.
Yeah, a lot more than the Ted DiBiase one.
Mm.
And Mark Henry beat out Alberto Del Rio. I was very happy to see that. Always liked Mark Henry. Always did not like Del Rio. So that was cool. So cycling back around here, Edge beat Mark Henry, and Seth Rollins beat out Brock Lesnar, which part of me kind of thought that wasn't really necessarily true, even though I fucking hate Brock Lesnar as champion. But I was like, you know what? I'm cool with it. And then Edge beat out Seth Rollins in the round 3 vote, so I mean, Edge continued on here. Edge got all the way up to the semifinals. He even beat out Kurt Angle.
The thing with the Brock Lesnar Seth Rollins is that understanding everyone's biases against Brock Lesnar, it's completely bogus vote, that one. Just Brock Lesnar is far more significant in the history of champions than Seth Rollins ever was.
And it's sad to say that, too, because it's like, it is true. I mean, look at the Universal Championship alone. Brock Lesnar is the Universal Championship at this point. He's held the title longer than anybody by far. He's the one of only 4 people that have held it.
He's the only 2-time champion.
Because Balor had it for a day. That doesn't even matter. He might as well not even be on the record. Kevin Owens had it because they really didn't have any other options. And I like Kevin Owens a lot. He's one of my favorites, but you could tell that was just not like the biggest priority for them. That's why they just threw it on Goldberg to throw it back on Brock. And then Brock held it for, fucking year and a half. And right when you finally do the Roman Reigns things and he gets the whole leukemia situation and stuff, they go straight to just like, well, we need to put it on Brock again. In their mind, Brock Lesnar is this like this otherworldly type of thing, and he is everything when it comes to the Universal Championship, which is why it was such a mistake in my mind to give him the championship again, because however long you have this, it's like you need multiple years at this point to rehab the Universal Championship to get it away from just being the Brock Lesnar belt. And Seth Rollins beating him, I was cool with it because I just like my own personal bias kind of got in the way. But if Brock Lesnar would have beaten Rollins and then he would have beaten Edge, and for that matter, if he would have beaten out CM Punk too, I would have understood it,
Yeah.
I think for Callum and I, Brock Lesnar, we can remember a time where Brock Lesnar was actually fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier for us to say, I like Seth Rollins, but Brock has done a lot more and means a lot more. For fans of like just today's product alone, they're not going to see it that way, and I don't blame them for that.
And just for the record, I've never said that Brock Lesnar isn't awesome. I still think he's awesome.
He could be.
Yeah, and like it's the way they use him, and the way that it's not his fault that they give him a stranglehold over the title. It's what they want to do, and that's limited him to an extent. But when he wants to put out a performance, as we saw with like the Daniel Bryan match, as we've seen with matches against AJ Styles, then he does put on a great performance.
Yeah, it's the Vince McMahon call that screws everything up.
Yeah.
There's a
So-
difference between like complaining about that they're misusing Roman Reigns and that they're misusing Brock Lesnar and that they're misusing, so on and so forth, and the person themselves not being any good.
Yeah.
And then there's also a difference between it's okay if they released Mojo Rawley. Like that kind of thing where it's just like
we dislike Brock Lesnar for very different reasons why people would dislike Nia Jax, for instance.
yeah, that's a
Brock
good way to put
Lesnar-
it.
Brock Lesnar is pushed very highly and put in matches and situations where he holds titles, like in Stranglehold has pretty much the same match over and over again, and that's the way they want it to be. Whereas they push Nia Jax, and even though she's utterly useless in the ring and on the microphone, but she's related to The Rock, so
Yeah, that's
not
basically
like
the good way to put it.
No.
yeah. I see the reason. I don't like the reasons, but they do it anyway for both of those situations.
Looping back around here, just going in like snake pattern. Kurt Angle had beaten Randy Savage. I think that I would have, and I think I did, vote for Randy Savage over Kurt Angle, but that's a little bit more of me not being into the Kurt Angle era as much, so wasn't too shocked about that one.
Yeah, I think I voted Kurt. That's a hard one though.
Yeah, I would have been fine, kind of either way with that one.
And Roman Reigns beat out Bob Backlund, which I wasn't shocked about after round one, where he was losing to Ted DiBiase like that. But Kurt Angle beats out Roman Reigns, and Kurt Angle loses to Edge, which puts Edge in the semifinals. Out of that whole bottom right section of the bracket, if you're an old school guy, I would have thought Bob Backlund would have won, or maybe Randy Savage. If you're in the Attitude Era as like your go-to, I would have thought Brock, Edge, or maybe Angle would have won. And a modern person, I would have thought Brock or Rollins. So it kind of worked out in a lot of ways that I sort of saw it coming. I would have been really shocked if it would have been like, all right, semifinals on that bottom right bracket is like Buddy Rogers or Del Rio or something like, or even Dolph Ziggler. Like I like Ziggler, but he hasn't had some great world title reigns.
Yeah, I think if we were to look at that bottom section and be completely objective, like Edge is a good choice.
Yeah,
but I think realistically it should have been either Randy Savage or Brock Lesnar.
I agree.
All those I would have been cool with. Especially when I had put this bracket up there after I did like the balancing act of all the combination of the title reigns and all that kind of stuff. I was looking at this as more so, all right, well, the right hand side is Hogan, more than I was like, this section's going to be this guy, this section's going to be that guy. I was just like, all right, right hand side is Hogan then. But we'll get to that because we had mentioned before, Pedro Morales lost to Yokozuna. CM Punk beats Psycho Sid. CM Punk beats Yokozuna, that's the CM Punk section. AJ Styles had beaten Jeff Hardy. I wasn't too shocked about that. But Daniel Bryan beat Hulk Hogan. That one I didn't get. I understand Daniel Bryan's popular, but you're really going to compare Daniel Bryan's title reign to Hulk Hogan and go with Daniel Bryan? Come on, guys. I know Hogan is bad in a lot of ways, like, I don't want to vote for a guy who said this or whatever, but really? 56.2% of the vote goes to Daniel Bryan?
Listen, if you're going to vote Hogan down based on what he says or his attitude or his race tactics, and they are completely fair reasons to dislike somebody. And I completely understand why people do dislike Hulk Hogan. I don't like Hulk Hogan because he's an unapologetic racist. Because he doesn't actually seem to be any way remorseful for what he did or what he said. But so you're going to allow people like the wife-beating Stone Cold Steve Austin through.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
You're going to allow they didn't vote Ultimate Warrior through, but if Ultimate Warrior had gone through the stuff that he said in the past, Kurt Angle, severe alcoholic and stuff like that in the past, and drug taking Shawn Michaels for always bitching backstage and stuff along those lines. AJ Styles, the stuff that he said about the gay community and things like that. It's like every single one of these people, probably not all of them, but a significant number of them, especially in the older era, have a very checkered past. They're not a single one of these people are perfect individuals. A lot of them are very far from perfect individuals. Mr. Perfect's not even on this list, so we can't even say that. But you could just like point anyone around them, and you could find something in their past which would suggest that they're not very good people, or not very responsible people at the very least.
Yeah, and that's just one of those other ones that made me go, all right, people are voting not based off of the world title reigns. They're voting on, I like Daniel Bryan better.
Yeah,
as a person.
Oddly enough, Daniel Bryan is one of the few people that doesn't have really any sort of checkered past. So if it was like a stake of like, oh, who's the better person, Daniel Bryan or Hulk Hogan, it's quite easily going to be Daniel Bryan. But it doesn't make sense in regards to their championship credibility.
Mm-hmm. Which put us like with AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan, and AJ Styles beats him, which Daniel Bryan gets a little measure of revenge by actually beating AJ Styles for the championship after that part of the tournament had gone down. And then Punk beats AJ Styles. Not too shocked about that one in the grand scheme of things, because Punk still has his supporters.
We need to talk about this, really. Guys, it's not 2012 anymore. Move on.
This tournament feels like it with the way the finals ended up.
Yeah, but that he's moved on. Why can't you move on? He's never coming back. He's never wrestling again. He's not, from everything that he's basically done since leaving WWE, he's not that good of a person. He probably actually despises a lot of you guys that have voted for him because just his attitude towards WWE fans and WWE in general. So the fact that you still want to vote for him, and if you think you're doing that as like a protest against, oh, I'm going to vote for CM Punk because like WWE wouldn't like it if I was voting for CM Punk. First of all, it's our tournament, so you
do have to remember that people think Tony has something to do with WWE.
Yeah.
I mean, I can change colors of days and stuff.
And he was, I guess what to categorize it, not so much flavor of the month, but flavor of a year or so. Didn't really extend far beyond that.
I think it says a lot about what CM Punk meant to people. Like, Punk, for whatever reason, that whole thing was like the last thing that people got excited for.
I think it's not so much about Punk the person, it's what Punk represented.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, Punk represents being angry at WWE and hating WWE because the product is stale and the people behind the scenes don't have a clue what they're doing. And that's what CM Punk represented during that summer of Punk and all the stuff that's gone on since he walked out and everything like that. And I think people still just see him as like this bastion of, we don't like WWE, what WWE are doing right now. We're still going to watch it every week because we're like fucking idiots. But you know, that we're just sheep that will just follow whatever shit they put on TV anyway. But we're going to vote for CM Punk because deep down we actually really hate what they're doing. And I know it's not the case for, I'm not trying to pinpoint you two with the fact because like you do it as part of your like work. So like, and a lot of people do. But people that just like complain and go on Twitter and then just don't do anything relating to professional wrestling and then watch the next week, just go, well, if you don't like it so much, don't vote for CM Punk on this sort of thing. Just don't watch the product.
Yeah. But he really is. I mean, that's basically what CM Punk translates to, is the Stone Cold Steve Austin that is the real Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because Austin was the whole idea of, we're going to rebel against the people in charge, but it's a storyline.
Yeah.
Punk was the one, I'm going to rebel against the people in charge for real. And in the reality era type thing, that really caught on, and he was the last Steve Austin type character, but people just, I mean, like, I guess you can kind of look at it this way. Yokozuna, from start to finish, he pretty much popped up, what was it, late 92?
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly?
Just before the Royal Rumble, I think, just a few months before that.
So, even if you give him mid-92, he was done by 97. And that's 5 years maximum of what his whole whole entire career was, just 5 years. And Yokozuna is a memorable type of guy. And when you used to win, Bret Hart's the 5-time champion, it was like, wow, he won it for the 5th time. This is crazy and stuff. And now John Cena's been gone for a year or so, but people still kind of look at him as like the franchise guy, and he was crowned the franchise guy over a dozen years ago. Like, everything kind of has a shorter shelf life and needs a lot longer to be able to, amount to the same kind of thing and stuff. And you've got people that are around for over a decade now, and it's like, oh, they're just hitting their stride. I wonder if they're going to get their, like, 5-year title reign type thing or something like that. Like, even a year or two ago, people were talking about Dolph Ziggler, and they're like, Dolph is like, he could be one of those guys that we should really push for the future. And it's like, Dolph's been around. He's been around a long-ass time. And it used to be somebody was around for 3 years, and it was like, oh, he's a veteran kind of a thing. So CM Punk, he had a short time frame where he was the hottest thing in the world. And that was the focal point, basically. It's almost an old school type thing. In the past...
But hold on, because I don't know if you remember that whole thing. He was not
the absolute focal point. No, he kept losing to John Cena in different regards like that. Like, he was still not the main event and everything.
Yeah, he's a classic example of WWE giving the fans what they want, but not actually giving the fans what they want.
Yeah.
In the sense that we'll give him the title for a year, but we'll push every other storyline ahead of his because he's just still like the third from bottom of the card act guy, but he'll defend the championship, so it feels like it's more meaningful. Whereas we'll put John Cena versus John Laurinaitis in the main event and stuff like that because it's got.
Because that's the story we really want. And if you weren't bitching and complaining about CM Punk, we would probably have the title on John Laurinaitis right now, like that kind of thing.
It's a thing that's happened constantly. Like, you look at Eddie Guerrero's title reign, Chris Benoit's title reign, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho. Every person that isn't like a classic Vince McMahon guy, when they get the World Championship, it's not as important as when a Triple H or a Randy Orton or a Undertaker, John Cena gets the World Championship.
This year with AJ Styles.
Exactly.
Styles is the champion. He's the only champion that they can depend on. Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe are main eventing.
And the thing is, he is a Vince McMahon guy. Vince McMahon loves him, but Vince McMahon loved Eddie Guerrero as well, but he wouldn't put him at the top because even if Vince McMahon does see a lot of value in you and does think that you're like a big deal and wants to have you around, he still sees someone like you and looks at AJ Styles and looks at Brock Lesnar and he knows which one in his mind is the main event.
And for anybody who thinks that that's not going to apply to WrestleMania this year, you're fooling yourselves. Daniel Bryan is not main eventing WrestleMania this year.
No.
So you know how WWE kind of absolved the tag title legacy into the belt that started in 2002? Do you think they're going to absolve the WWE title legacy into the Universal title? And should they ever be merged again, the Universal title will be the title?
I don't think they'd go that far. I'd be highly surprised if they didn't just keep the WWE, because people would, and I know it was a case of like, people didn't like the colour of the Universal Championship, so they complained for a couple of weeks and then they got used to it. This would be something that would cause genuine waves if they were to get rid of the WWE Championship, essentially.
I think, if anything, that they would do something more along the lines of getting rid of the United States Championship.
Well, and putting the US Championship as like a mid-tier thing instead.
Yeah, making the Universal something like that. I could see them, because it'll all depend on what happens with the brand split. And our first indication of that's going to be whatever happens with the Fox deal. But if they were to merge the brands again, they're going to merge the titles. And I think that they would go with, like, let's have the Universal Champion and the WWE Champion, and they're going to fight, kind of like what they did before with the World Heavyweight Championship and the WWE Championship.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly, Randy Orton won, and he was the World Heavyweight Champion. Yet, they carried it on as the WWE Championship.
Nope.
We carried both belts.
No, Randy Orton was the WWE champion, and then they just absolved the title with the name WWE World Heavyweight Championship back into the WWE title. But the reason that I brought this up is because lately they've been using the Universal title, like whenever they do charity runs, they've been giving people the Universal Championship. Or what are you gonna say?
Well, it's just mainly because that's the Raw belt.
But that's what I'm saying. Does that mean that they're viewing it as the new big belt? And they're also obsessed with the term WWE Universe.
I just think that the only reason that they're doing that is because it's the Raw belt, and if WWE Championship was on Raw, they'd be pushing the WWE Championship more. It's just a case of that when they decided way back to put the WWE Championship on SmackDown, they knew they had to create another title for Raw. I don't think they put too much emphasis. Oh, it's also a case that they do push the Universal Championship, but that's only because Brock's holding it or Roman Reigns was holding it because it's on the A show.
Yeah. And they could, like, somewhere down the line, they could have WWE Universal Champion, and it's not carrying on the lineage of the Universal Championship.
Yeah. I'm not saying, like, it's beyond the realms of possibility, but I think it would be a stupid move, which doesn't say they won't do it, because they make stupid moves all the time. But it doesn't make any sense when you have 60 years of, like, legacy behind one championship, and one of them's only a couple of years old.
And let's be honest, if that merge comes when Triple H is in charge instead of Vince McMahon, Triple H is going to keep the WWE Championship.
Oh, absolutely.
He's not going to go with the Universal.
And even if it happens before Vince in charge, as soon as Triple H takes over, the WWE Championship is coming back.
Yeah, he'll kind of just like retcon things, so to speak.
Wait, go on.
Triple H, by the way, he had beaten Andre the Giant in the first round. He beats Chris Jericho in the second round. And he beats Batista in round 3. Batista had beaten Dean Ambrose. But he hits his mark when it comes to... Hits his mark, that's not the phrase I'm giving. He hits a roadblock when it comes to Steve Austin in round 4. Round 4 being Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Triple H. That's a good round 4. Triple H has had a lot of title reigns. Some of them have been good, some of them have been bad. Steve Austin has been the focal point in the past. I had gone with Austin as well. But you know what? If Triple H would have won that one, I would have potentially had seen the possibility behind that. My bigger thing was Steve Austin had beaten John Cena. And I would have gone with John Cena over Steve Austin. So my section of that, I would have gone with John Cena over Triple H, and I would have thought John Cena should have been the winner for that part.
Absolutely.
Well, I would have disagreed. I think Austin's, while shorter and lesser title reigns, he's been was a far more meaningful champion than John Cena was. John Cena is an example of how the WWE Championship has been diluted in the past decade or so, because he's held it far too many times.
I looked at it more like Austin was better chasing the championship than being champion.
Which is weird, because he never really chased it that much. He was champion for the most amount of time, well, for the longest time that he was there for.
Well, he also didn't hold it for long, ever.
He did. He held it for a significant number of months. When he lost it, he always kind of won it almost a couple of weeks or months back after it. It was fine chasing it for every now and again, but he does actually hold it for a significant amount of time.
But I think by the time he gets to his lengthy run, isn't his lengthy run the 2001 title reign?
Yeah, but that one was pretty long, wasn't it? It was only interrupted by when Angle beat him, and then he won it a month, well, actually a couple of weeks after it.
But that's what I'm saying. When most people think Austin era, they're thinking that 98, 99, and he really does end up chasing more than he ends up holding the belt.
I disagree with that. I've been tracing back quite a lot of the stuff. He holds it from, again, don't want to get too much into a history lesson, but again, it's you're looking at history.
Well, that's why we're here, I think.
Yeah, but it's Austin holds it from WrestleMania 14 to King of the Ring, which is about, and then he wins it the night afterwards. Then he holds it up until there was the thing where Undertaker and Kane both pinned him at the same time.
Those are both 3-month reigns. I think it's 3 months, you get a break, and then another.
Yeah, 3 months, and then a 1-day break, then another 3 months. Then The Rock and Austin, then The Rock and Foley fight over it for a round. Then WrestleMania for another 3 months or so. Undertaker wins it, then another 3 months. Basically for a year of those 2 years, year and a half, maybe even of those 2 years, Austin's holding the championship.
I think you're right, but he's a good example of the beginning of it being diluted because it was such a hot potato.
There was far too many title changes in that time. And the Attitude Era is kind of the starting point of where you have reigns of people like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels that are holding championships for close to a year. And then it's starting that the longest you're going to see someone hold the championship is 3 or 4 months, and it's going to move on to something else.
That's why I kind of value John Cena's title reigns a little bit more, because even though he was up against people like, let's set up the Great Khali so he could lose to John Cena, let's set up Umaga so he could lose to John Cena, it still felt like John Cena having that title for that long was like, okay, well, he's making it seem like, damn, he is that champion. And with the Austin stuff, it was more like the story is to follow Austin more so than to follow the championship. And with John Cena, I always felt like it was more so, let's follow the championship. Like, he did more for the championship, I think, than Austin did, in my mind. There's an argument to be made the other way. Like, Austin beating Cena was not some big travesty to me. It was like, oh, okay, you guys went with Austin. All right. Like, you know. Those three, Austin, Cena, and Triple H, I would have thought that they all had a shot somewhere. Batista, no. And we had talked about Undertaker and, we didn't talk about it, but Undertaker had beaten Bruno Sammartino in round 3. Much as I'm a fan of Undertaker, I voted for Bruno Sammartino, because Bruno was, I mean, come on, the guy has more days as champion than anybody else by a long shot. He was the guy in a completely different era where without Bruno Sammartino, professional wrestling just doesn't exist. And
that's rough, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't probably go that far, but it's a sense of, again, we look back at the territory era, Bruno Sammartino had to be a draw. It's not the Undertaker isn't a draw, or isn't a big part of wrestling history, but to be fair, he's never really needed the WWE Championship.
Right, yeah. Undertaker as a character, I think, is more important in the WWE grand scheme of things than Bruno Sammartino in certain regards. But Bruno, like Undertaker, when he won that title, whenever he would win it, he was a guy that was a top guy, so you give him the championship. Bruno was the draw for that whole thing.
Which is a sense of like, you can only associate, when you think of Bruno Sammartino, you immediately associate him with the WWE Championship, because that was his belt. And for a decade, it was his belt. Whereas The Undertaker, you kind of more associate him with just the fun gimmick matches, his amazing entrance, the WrestleMania winning streak. It's like, it's hard to remember. Like, obviously you can recall it, but it's not like any of his championship reigns were particularly memorable.
Do you think that some of the people voting are either lapsed fans or younger fans, and they're assuming that just because he is the Undertaker, that he must have had a good title reign, right? I mean, he's the Undertaker.
I think so, yeah.
Either that or just they like the Undertaker more. But you can go back in history, and Undertaker, none of his title reigns have ever been that special. I think probably his best one is the one after he beat Batista. And even that was ended prematurely by injury. Mm-hmm. But like the one leading up, the one after Psycho Sid, he was playing second fiddle to the Hart Foundation in terms of like popularity in DX and Steve Austin at that point in time. He was just an afterthought, beating Hulk Hogan that only lasted a couple of days. He's really not that special as a champion. Special as a character, like an amazing character and like a huge part of WWE history, but as champion, he never really needed to be champion that much. And when he was, it wasn't really that special.
Yeah, that's why, to me, that was just sort of like, all right, he beats Bruno, but he can't beat the John Cena, Triple H, Steve Austin section. Like,
no,
that was the, I had said like the Hulk Hogan section on the right side. To me, it was like, this is the Austin, Cena, Triple H part, kind of.
We talk about him beating Randy Orton in round 4, because that would have been a difficult one for me to decide on. I can't remember which way I went on this one, but
I'm pretty sure I had picked Orton.
I mean, out of all of these people on this list, why has Randy Orton won the WWE Championship as many times as he has? Is probably my biggest question. Like, of all the other guys, I can kind of say, oh, maybe they held it a little bit too long, or they held it a few more times than they probably should have based on the thing, or maybe they didn't hold it enough. Randy Orton is probably on the highest point of the scale with somebody that held the WWE Championship far many times than he was worth.
I think it's because of when he was winning these belts. If you look at Randy Orton's 13 times?
Yes.
Yeah, 13.
And a lot of that is from the 09 exchange with Cena, because he had to get it back and forth so many times just to give them the excuse for the Iron Man matches and the Hell in a Cells. Another thing you have to remember is they do count that whole, well, Brian had it for a day and then it was held in abeyance. So that's kind of like a cheeky win for Randy there. And then there's the whole he won it twice in one night because of No Mercy 07.
That pissed me off so much.
It just like it is so remarkable to me that he's held it. Like every time I just see that stat, and I know that stat because you see it all the time, but it's just absolutely ridiculous. Orton is a great wrestler, and he has been at times over the past few years one of the top guys, and there's no denying that. But 13 times? I know it's a different era to someone like a Bret Hart or something like that, and you can't expect, like, you could say, okay, maybe 7 or 8 times in this era, that's fair enough, but 13?
I think if you were to take Randy Orton and you combine things, like we talk about this all the time, but if you go, say, the early 90s into, the Attitude Era type thing, and then you go, well, if we added a brand split, who would have been champion? Well, Owen would have been champion, Bulldog would have been champion, DiBiase would have been, Jake the Snake, whatever. I think if you do the reverse when it comes to Randy Orton, you basically cut his title reigns in half. And
you do. And that's why when they merged the brands, he was in the back seat for a while. He had that initial run on top, and then after he lost it to Bryan, he was about to be on the pre-show against the Wyatt family for a pay-per-view.
I think that if Randy Orton, throughout his career, he would have been transported back in time and he would have been in like that 90s New Gen or Attitude Era type, he would have been a perennial main event type of talent, but not necessarily the guy. More than maybe he might have had like 4 really decent title reigns, maybe 1 or 2 more on top of that kind of things. But there's no denying Randy Orton is a guy that deserved to be a world champion. It's not like he's like, Jinder Mahal, where it's just like, oh, come on, give me a break. I don't know about 13 times. I agree with that.
I look at him in a sense of a guy with so much potential, but I think the only time period he really kind of merited being WWE champion was his 2009 run, where he was a bit of a psychopath and he was actually quite interesting on television. Every single other title reign just feels like a bit
placeholder.
Unnecessary.
So you would consider that his quintessential title reign?
Yeah. So I'd say 2009, 2010 period, he can win the championship maybe 3, maybe 4 times if they're doing a lot of swaps at that time. And then after that, you just phase him out.
That's actually a good question that maybe we could ask about certain different people here. Like, The Miz, he had 1 world title reign. We know who that, like, what his main title reign was and stuff like that. But, like, somebody like a Bret Hart, what is his quintessential title reign?
After WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, I think, the win over Yokozuna and then leading up into, was it Backlund he lost it to in that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd probably say the one after beating Diesel then, up into Michaels, was his quintessential one.
Because I would have gone with the WrestleMania 10 one, too. Because then you kind of piggyback off of that a little bit and stuff. And for John Cena, I'm assuming we're going with, like, the year-long title reign. But he's had 15 other ones, so it's like,
yeah.
So
it's not going to be his most recent.
I go for his third one, the one that came after he beat Edge in the TLC, because that was the one where he wasn't the new kid on the block anymore. He was like a well-established top guy, and he ran through Edge, Orton, Michaels, Triple H, and held that belt for a year. and only lost it due to injury. So that's my quintessential John Cena run.
That's funny. I go for the one where he won it in the Elimination Chamber and then lost it immediately afterwards to Batista. That seems like the quintessential John Cena type.
Randy Savage has to be Mega Powers.
Oh, absolutely. It can't be the
Oh
one
yeah,
after Flair.
yeah.
Like, that's just, I mean, that's a given. And Rollins, of course, has to be the Authority.
He only had it once.
Well, no, he held it twice. He beat Roman Reigns and then lost it immediately to Dean Ambrose.
Oh,
Yeah,
fuck.
that's
I don't
like-
fucking count that.
Right, I mean, that's like an easy
What-
one to pick when it comes
What's
to
it-
that.
This one's quite interesting. What is Edge's quintessential title reign?
That was the one I was going to ask next, because to me, when I think Edge as world champion, I get a mental image of a couple different things. I get cashing in on John Cena, but then I go, yeah, but that doesn't really amount to much. That's more of a moment.
That was a month-long title reign.
Yeah. But I go more so with La Familia. And then I'm like, wow, that's his legacy one? Like, leading up until WrestleMania 24, I'm like...
Yeah, you know what? I love Edge. He's like my second favorite of all time. But yeah, I think I go with the one leading up to Mania 24 as well, because I definitely go with the SmackDown one where he has the world title. I know that much. But then I think, what did he really do? Because he kept getting injured, or his reigns were always so short. It's got to be that one leading up to Taker.
See, I always go with the his second one, because after his first one, it always seemed like Edge was just going to be a flash in the pan. It's like, okay, we'll give him one championship ranks. He won the Money in the Bank thing. Now we'll just pass it back to John Cena, and now Edge is done in the main event. But winning it the second time, and the way he managed to like just hold on to it and just show that he's an actual top main event guy.
Which one are you talking about?
The one where he beat RVD and then lost to Cena at
yeah.
TLC.
Yeah, see, that one's hard for me because still that was just attached to that one rivalry.
Well, to be fair, Edge has always been attached to that one rivalry. That was that and the Undertaker rivalry, the two rivalries that really were his main event ones.
That's okay. Those were fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just a case like that's the one that kind of makes me feel like established him as a main event guy rather than somebody we just gave a transitional title reign to because he'd been there for a long time.
What's the quintessential Hogan one?
It's got to
first
be
one.
84 to 88. Yeah.
That's the one where Hulkmania is like really running wild, and every title reign after that just seems to diminish in importance. Especially towards the end, it feels like every title reign is just they don't actually want him to be champion anymore. At least the fans don't. They
have
they
no
found
choice,
someone else.
though.
They found Randy Savage, or they found Ultimate Warrior. They have other people they want to have in that spot instead.
And for that matter, what's the Undertaker one? That one's tough.
I think the one after Batista, because it'd been a while since he'd held the championship at that point in time, and he kind of felt like a big deal again. I didn't know they hadn't felt like a big deal, but it just felt right that he was world champion at that point after so long.
Like, for me, that's my favorite that's my favorite title victory for Undertaker, but quintessential for me, I go with his 97 one just because he was still like in his prime, and that was kind of, hey, you won at WrestleMania, you're going to be the guy. It didn't work out that way for him, but that was their intention.
Well, Undertaker managed to get to the semifinals and lose to Steve Austin. Edge made it to the semifinals, lost it to CM Punk, which set up the same exact finals as what we had the last time. Because we did this tournament before. We did this many years ago. I think it was like 2014. And we had a lot less people because some people just didn't even exist on like the radar. Like nobody knew who Kevin Owens was. Nobody knew who Roman Reigns was. Like different things like that. In that kind of capacity as like world champions and stuff. But it still came down to the same thing. It still came down to Stone Cold Steve Austin and CM Punk. And I certainly would not have had that as my finals. I would have had Hulk Hogan on that one side, and it would have been him against either Austin or Cena or San Martino or Triple H, or you know what I mean. And I would have still gone with Hogan. I still think that Hulk Hogan is the best world champion in WWE history. Winner of this tournament, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Okay, once you gave me that final, it had to come down to Austin winning, because as much as Punk meant for a blip on the radar, Austin, even though I said that I don't think his championship reigns meant too much, Austin and the championship ushered in a new prosperous time for the company, so he had to win this. But I kind of want to ask you guys, Austin ushered in a new era. Punk tried to, but both guys really ushered in this. Oh, if you're not watching wrestling, you should probably start watching again. So what's your immediate thought when somebody says Stone Cold Steve Austin, and what's your immediate thought when somebody says CM Punk?
Austin, my go-to, if somebody just says, like, imagine Stone Cold Steve Austin, I picture him holding up the championship and JR going, the Austin era has begun. CM Punk, I think of him sitting down, bitching and complaining.
Yeah, CM Punk's, like, his magnum opus from WWE will be the pipe bomb promo, and it always will be.
Yeah.
So Steve Austin has multiple moments, but I guess his big thing would be, I go with the beer truck thing. But, but essentially, it's any situation that involves Steve Austin, The Rock, and Vince McMahon.
Yeah, or stunning Vince, or, you know, just him getting hauled away, giving the middle fingers up.
Yeah.
Like,
it's anything that Steve Austin... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just like, anything that's involved Steve Austin and Vince McMahon's feud, or Steve Austin and The Rock's feud.
For me, when I think of Stone Cold Steve Austin, somebody said, give me one moment. My instant image is him with the blood dripping down in the sharpshooter. And that is like that star-making moment for Austin, because, yeah, he had some fun stuff with, you know, the beer truck, and obviously his crowning moment with Michaels, but for me, it's always that submission match and just that shot of him in the sharpshooter. And for Punk, it's probably the image of him blowing a kiss to Vince with the title, because for a moment, I genuinely thought, okay, we're going somewhere here. You know, this can be something. And of course, it wasn't. It largely was just a moment in time. But that's my, like, quintessential vision of CM Punk. Just him blowing the kiss to Vince McMahon.
now, if you say, what's your picture of Hulk Hogan? I picture him with the Winged Eagle title.
I picture him, like, sitting on a couch talking to Brooke about how she should be dated. Why is this guy not rich anyway? But no, it would be so Hogan. It would be, I think, the Ultimate Challenge almost. The build up to that, or maybe even slamming Andre is probably the bigger thing.
So when I think of Hogan, I think of sort of like that, the peak Hulkamania. He's ripping the shirt off. He's got the Winged Eagle, and the arena is packed. But when I think of Hogan, I think of Winged Eagle and packed arenas, you know?
So that explains to me why I think Hulk Hogan should have won. But given the choice of Austin and Punk,
it's an
Austin was the guy, Punk was the guy reminding you of the guy.
I think that's probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah, it had to be Austin in that regard. But I still think it should have been Austin against Hogan at the end, and Hogan should have won. Although, hey, I can't vote for more than one vote, so...
Well, there's tons of people on that side that should have been in ahead of CM Punk.
You were watching, maybe even running the website by the time Punk had made the announcement, or the pipe bomb, right?
Smark Out Moment was started 2010, I think? If I remember correctly?
So it's about a year later or whatever.
Or maybe 2009? Yeah, maybe 2000, maybe like summer 2009, I think is when I made the site. But I had been doing stuff on WrestleZone before that.
So, like I said, for me, Punk kind of represented, oh, this is really cool. People are talking about wrestling again. I assume it was the same thing for you guys.
I mean, I'd never stopped watching, but it was.
Well, me
get a
neither,
sense that
but
it felt big. It felt bigger again.
Me neither, but I had people who had stopped watching coming to me and being like, "Oh my god, what is this CM Punk thing?"
Again, it goes back to what we said earlier about CM Punk. He represents the potential that things were going to be different and things were going to change, and he was going to be the poster child of that element of things. A vote for CM Punk in this is a vote for what could have been rather than what actually was.
Yeah,
you're living off the memory of feeling the excitement about, oh my god, things going to change, rather than looking back objectively and seeing that nothing actually changed.
I'm really curious about this. I'm looking at my list of the different landslide victories and different things like that. Only one vote separated Austin and The Undertaker in round 5. It was 38-37. So we could have very easily had The Undertaker versus CM Punk in the finals. One vote goes the opposite way, Austin loses. And that is really interesting to me because that means, kind of by process of elimination, Austin had beaten CM Punk and Undertaker just barely lost to Steve Austin. If it would have been Austin out of the mix and Undertaker in there instead in the finals, Undertaker theoretically would have beaten CM Punk, and we would have been talking about the best world champion of all time as The Undertaker.
If it came down to Undertaker and Punk objectively, I would have had to vote for Punk.
I probably would have too.
Talking about title reigns and what they meant to the championship, I would have voted for Punk.
Yeah.
I mean, objectively, if it come down to those two, I would have said, yeah, we're just not going to talk about the fight from now. We're just going to end it here. Essentially, you've just proven that you can't be trusted with the information like this.
But I think this is the second tournament that I've done that kind of says, I think we need to start grouping these brackets into eras.
Yep.
Because this is a great concept, but the execution was a little flawed and it allowed for stupid votes.
Yeah, I thought that this was one of those. This was really literally the very first time that I could ever do a tournament based off of some kind of a rubric that wasn't just like randomized or, kind of a guesswork type thing. Because when we do the Sexiest Superstars tournament, there's always more people that they've added in the year that we can't judge based off of last year. This year around, since we did the tournament for 2018, heading into 2019, we've got like 20 more women or whatever it is. We got Ginny, we have MJ Jenkins, Deanna Purrazzo, like just all these other different types of names. And you can't really say, all right, well, Io Shirai ranks on this part of the tournament based off of last year because she didn't exist to the tournament last year. And on like the Smark Madness tournaments, how are you supposed to really objectively rank something like the best gimmicks of all time? You rank it based off of what you think people are going to vote on. Clearly, the Royal Rumble is going to be one of the favorites, so I'm not going to put that in the first round against one of the other favorites like ladder match. With this, it was the first time I was able to actually take some kind of a metric and apply it, and it still ended up being a bias type thing. So I think going forward in fall of 2019, whatever the Champsgiving tournament is for that year, which I'm kind of assuming is going to be best women's champion, but it could be tag team, it could be Triple Crown, it could be Grand Slam, it could be Intercontinental. Maybe around that time frame, they create some different weird merge of championship situation because that's going to be heading towards the whole the Fox situation. Maybe we get some kind of thing where it's like, well, we're bringing back the hardcore championship. And then it's like, all right, fuck, let's do best hardcore champion of all time. It's, I don't really know, but.
How the hell are you going to do that?
Oh, that'll be just a mad rush.
That'll be
like
final between Raven and Stevie Richards.
Yeah, that might even be fun enough just on its own to just be like, this is insanity. Let's just go with it. Just be like, all right, how do you rank Pete Gas and Godfather's Ho? Like, it's just. But I think that going forward, the best way to eliminate at least a little bit of the bias is to have it based off of 4 quadrants of eras and have like the golden era of like. See, I don't know. We'd have to depend on like where do we go like pre-Hogan and then we go with the Hogan era and then the New Gen era with like the Attitude Era mixed in with that, and then we go with the Reality Era, the PG era, the current era, like.
Well, no, I think it would be if we have to break it up into 4. It's Hogan and pre-Hogan. It's
New Gen and Attitude.
New Gen Attitude, and then Ruthless Aggression / now.
Oh, that's 3.
No, Hogan, New Gen, Attitude.
Oh, you'd split New Gen and Attitude. Okay.
Because a lot of people, well, you either group the Ruthless Aggression into now, or you either group the Ruthless Aggression into the Attitude. It's a weird transitional.
You're almost kind of screwed because it's like, I guess you can kind of see it as being pre-Hogan, and then the Hogan era, and then the New Gen era, which ends at Steve Austin winning the title, and then the Attitude Era starts with Steve Austin, and then goes up until.
What the?
When would that end?
I would just like try and say for a situation like this where you have 64 names, or technically 62, but if you count the vacants, whatever, 64. Just go with the first 16, group them together. Next 16, group them together. Next 16, next 16.
Maybe
makes it, and because otherwise you're going to have lopsided situations where because there were so many more champions from Attitude Era onwards, that side's going to be completely full, whereas the other side's going to be very sparse because people actually held the titles for years on end at that point in time.
Yeah, that's true.
So you kind of have to just break it up. It's like, okay, so these were the first 16 world champions. We'll put these together in one bracket, so we'll find out who's the best of the first stage, the WWE Championship, if you want to call it that, and then this next one, and then next group.
And this also is only applicable when it comes to long title reign things, like Tag Team Championship or Intercontinental or something like that.
Yeah,
if we were to do
like
NXT Championship, we only have a couple of years worth of people to begin with. So even though
you might do.
Maybe not even, yeah. And that might be like that's another thing too. Champsgiving, I wanted to make it a longer one. I wanted to start at the top with the world champions in WWE, but ideally I'd like it to be a quicker tournament. So we might end up having something like the NXT one next year, where it might just be like, we have like 14 people or something like that. Cool. We'll knock it out all through November and just have like a 3-round thing.
And the best thing
you don't have to have it be 32 or 64 or whatever.
And the best thing about an NXT related one is the fact that there won't be any sort of like error related bias because it's only
right now
like 4 or 5 year old show. I mean, it'll still be the bias in the sense of like, some people might vote for Seth Rollins as a better NXT champion than Neville because Seth Rollins is a big deal in WWE now and Neville's nowhere to be seen. Mm-hmm. Even though Seth Rollins wasn't actually that memorable as an NXT champion.
I think everybody still kind of evens out nicely if you do an NXT.
True, but I still think for the most part you've got to expect with tournaments like this that people are just going to vote for the person they like the most.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't know how to really get around because it's the honor system. You guys have to vote based off of what the tournament's supposed to be about, and if you don't, then you skew the results, and
then we'll just
then you get Ted DiBiase,
blackjack and hookers.
Yeah, and then you get a winner reveal bracket breakdown type thing where we're like, you guys are stupid, like that kind of thing. In certain regards, I mean, obviously, when it comes to like. Dean Ambrose beats out Diesel, it's like, all right, yeah, make an argument for it, whatever. But that whole like Daniel Bryan beating out Hulk Hogan, Goldberg beating up Bret Hart, Ted DiBiase somehow almost beating up Bob Backlund, even though he didn't really have a title reign. That's the type of stuff that makes me go, all right, well, maybe we don't do Champsgiving next year. Yeah.
It's a very cruel irony in the fact that Goldberg ended Bret Hart's run in this tournament like he ended his career.
Just a swift kick in the votes. So, generally speaking, the tournament, I think, it's a good idea, but it's flawed because of that bias. And that kind of depends on you guys. It's not really a flaw in the tournament. It's a flaw in the people voting. And it's up to you guys to
Be
kind of
better.
make it be
Yeah,
something a little bit more legitimate on that.
a vote is
So keep-
only as flawed as the people voting on it. It's
And
the
that's
US
why,
elections.
yeah, I was just going to go into the politics thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So vote for Kane. Vote
Yeah.
for Thanos, I guess. Vote for Captain America. And vote for your favorite champions next year in whatever we end up deciding to do. But the next tournament that we're going to be doing, it'll cycle back around to Smark Madness in March, February, whenever I start that. I think I technically started in February, but I don't remember for sure. And, we'll play around with that when we get around to that and come around again to Champsgiving in October or November of next year. But I want to thank everybody for participating in any capacity that you did. And I want you to drop your comments below and tell me what you thought about the tournament. What are the pluses and minuses of this? How did it play out in your mind? What would you have gone with if you didn't go with Steve Austin in the finals or whatever the case may be like that? Let's go around and just take care of some plugs for some other things. I do not know what the main event is going to be next week. I have no idea. Thankfully, we're on a little bit of a break when it comes to not having to talk about another fucking pay-per-view. So we got a little bit of some flexibility. We can do something a little bit fun. It's not going to be the mailbag because the mailbag is going to be the very last thing that we do before the Smark Out Moment Awards, which will be the very last thing of the year. And we're going to record that somewhere like the 21st or something like that. I don't really know. So we got a little bit of time for that. So start actually prepping your list if you want to be a part of dropping the comments on that one. You got a lot of time to sort that out if you start it now, practically a month. And we do have that mailbag. We do have TLC coming up at some point. So TLC predictions are happening that week before. All other than that, though, I don't really know what's going to be that other extra thing. So if you have any suggestions of what you would like to see for that one final main event of the year, that special feature that you would like us to get to, whether it's on the Superstar Scores type event, or maybe you want to have us do one more play the game at the end of the year or something like that. Whatever it is, just let me know. And we will sort that out over the next couple of days. The best way that you can be aware of when that video gets posted is to subscribe on the YouTube channel and ring the bell for notifications, or follow the Facebook and Twitter accounts at Smark Out Moment. Check out smarkoutmoment.com for those kind of things that are happening there. Go to Fanboys Anonymous to find out everything that's happening on Fanboys Anonymous. If you want to show your support for Smark Out Moment on the monetary side of things, there's the Patreon, so hit up that.
Yeah,
buy a t-shirt.
Support the Patreon, because if you can hear some background noise, I currently live with 10 people. So please give us some money so that I can fucking move.
It sounds like 9 now.
Might be, depending on what the other ones are doing.
I mean, we can also use some of that money to teach Rob to use the mute button every now and again.
I try to, but it's in this house, it's hard.
There's also the TeePublic and the Redbubble merchandise shops. Pick those things up if you're interested in that. And all the other kind of stuff that's happening, you'll find all over the place for Smark Out Moment and myself. Callum?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14, and I'll be working on the power rankings for this week soon. So it'll be up probably tomorrow. And just check out all the other weekly stuff that's going out on there, including the Triple Threat, Women's Wrestling Weekly, Cheap Pop, Cheap Heat, all the other great stuff.
Rob?
Yeah, WrestleZone.com for your daily wrestling news. I do the WrestleZone daily apparently every day now on the Facebook page. So that's always a good time with myself and Chicago comedian Kevin Kellum. Yeah, Triple Threat this week. Callum was a great help, and I really appreciate everything he does. And check that Triple Threat out. Check out WrestleZone. Check out TimekillerApparel.com. Buy a t-shirt, buy a hoodie, all that good stuff. And, stay tuned to eWrestling News.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that you appreciate what I do.
You're welcome.
Any plugs for Rob's family members?
Yeah. They need to all go to school and just stay there. For just an update. 6 adults, 3 people, and one senior, 6 adults, 3 children, and a dog. So it's a mess right now, guys.
You can keep the dog.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for all the different things that are going on here. The likes, the favorites, the shares, and all the other kind of stuff that we got. We will see you next time with the hot tags for next week. Adios, everybody. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and we're being counted out.